Hi guys, this is my 1996 Mazda MX5 and it's currently running on a set of Suzuki GSXR 600 individual throttle bodies, which I've just literally made a kit for over the past couple of weeks. So this video is basically going to be showing you how I made it run on the stock ECU, because when I was doing this there isn't really much in the way of videos explaining how to do this on YouTube. For those who wonder whether it does actually run or not, it runs well, it drives, everything is perfectly normal, it idles, everything is like exactly the way it would be stock, just with individual throttle bodies. So for a start, the main problems you got to overcome when you're using a stock ECU is you got to use the stock throttle position sensor, which I have done. Normally the throttle position sensor would be over this side where I have one just plugging the hole, but you can't use that unless you have an aftermarket ECU, purely because it's a linear throttle position sensor, so it only turns the way the throttle turns, which in this case is that way. So it has to be on the side that will turn that way. So the way I got around this, I built this little bracket here, which bolts down this side and down this side, and then the throttle position sensor bolts to that, and the little throttle plate down there has got the little golden bracket thing that interlocks with the TPS itself. So when the throttle is actuated, if I can just show you here, it moves this throttle position sensor. The throttle bodies themselves, because it's from a GSXR, they have 2 injector holes, and they also have 2 sets of throttle bodies or throttle blades within the throttle bodies. The ones at the bottom are mechanically controlled, and the ones at the top, you can see there's a hole from there, which I've plugged. They're operated by an electronic motor to adjust airspeed and all that sort of stuff, but in this application it's not needed because it would just be a restriction. So they're all completely removed. All you do to do that is you take all the throttle bodies out, or throttle blades out, and remove the rod from there. As far as attaching it to the engine, this is a MX5 manifold which I got off eBay for £20. I cut through it and put these silicon joins on it, which then go to some stainless steel 90-degree bends, which are then hose clamped straight to the throttle bodies themselves. And the whole thing it moves around because of the silicon joiners, which is good because nothing will ever crack, but also it's nice and sturdy and doesn't move around too much. This on the top here is something I made myself. It's a GRP, I guess you could call it an intake plenum. It joins all the throttle bodies together and then joins them into one intake here, so you can run a standard air filter, and you can plug in the standard mass airflow sensor, which the cable runs down here and is extended all the way to back there. Other than that, no real modification has been done to the car. The only thing I have to do, which you may not have to depending on where your throttle bodies sit, is I deleted the brake booster, and that's just simply a plate, and you just have to make a new rod that goes from the brake pedal to the brake master cylinder, because the old one is too short. Other than that, that's all you really need to do. The fuel pressure regulator hooks up to all the throttle bodies. When you buy the throttle bodies, if you do get the vacuum line with it, you can just simply hook it straight up to the regulator down there, and that's it. That's all you have to do. You also have to loop the coolant lines, which I already had done previously, because normally the throttle body on the original intake manifold has a coolant line running through it to keep intake temperatures up in cold start. Another thing this kit doesn't have in it, it doesn't have an idle control valve, so your idle is set by this screw here and it will always be the same. There's no changing it, so on cold starts it does run a lot richer than it would normally, because it's obviously trying to compensate because the RPMs are usually up higher. That is basically it. It cleans up the engine bay a lot, not having your intake all the way over here, and it also means your intake is over this side where there's loads of cool fresh air, reverses that side, and I do have bonnet vents as well, which they are also a DIY thing on the budget, which literally goes straight onto where the air filter is. So plenty of cold air, and they sound pretty good still. Even with the plenum on, you can still hear the throttle bodies, and they sound pretty much the best naturally aspirated sound you could get from an engine. But yeah, that's it. Trying to keep the video short, but I'll put in some driving clips right now so you can see what the throttle bodies drive like. Okay, I don't know how well you can hear me, but it's raining, so I'll do my best to get some sound clips for you, but don't be surprised if they're shite, because it's really wet and I don't fancy taking this thing really that fast. I hope you enjoyed those driving shots. Just so you're aware that I've probably already put it in, but in some of the first clips it was sort of backfiring and stumbling at lower RPMs. Literally all that was the throttle position sensor. I adjusted it the other day to try and make it idle better, but never reset it to the actual voltage that it needed to be. And if you're curious, the voltage that your TPS needs to be showing out of these two pins here at idle will be from around 4.46 volts to 4.48, and at part throttle, which is what this is, because it's idles at 1000 RPM, just because that's where it likes it. You want to be looking around 4.5 volts at idle, and then full throttle should be 1.3 or 1.4 volts, because it's a linear potentiometer essentially, and that's what it does. So I had to adjust that, but after that it ran perfectly and it drives pretty much normal. There's no hiccups with it at all, so everything works. That's my MX5, and those are my individual throttle bodies.